Hello and welcome to a video about cells. This links to the Edexcel 921 GCSE Combined Science and Separate Science Biology specification. Cells are the building blocks of life. All living things are made of cells. The first type of cell I will be discussing are eukaryotic cells. Eukaryotic cells are cells that contain a nucleus. They also have membrane-bound organelles. This just means subcellular structures which have a membrane. So organelles is the scientific word used to describe subcellular structures. Animal and plant cells are both examples of eukaryotic cells. I will be looking at both of these cells in detail. The first cell I will be looking at is an animal cell. The following diagram is a general animal cell, and I have included the key subcellular structures that you need to know about. So, firstly, we have the nucleus. The nucleus contains chromosomes. It also controls the activities of the cell. What I mean when I say controls the activities of the cell is that it determines what the cell does, so what its function is. We then have the cytoplasm. The cytoplasm is a jelly-like structure where all the chemical reactions occur. Chemical reactions occur. Okay. We then have the cell membrane. The cell membrane is important in controlling the entry and exit of substances. So it's basically controlling what leaves and enters the cell. Okay. We then have these structures here, which are known as mitochondria. These are very important subcellular structures, as this is the site of respiration. Respiration is the chemical reaction between glucose and oxygen that releases the energy that is required for all living things to survive. And then finally, we have structures known as ribosomes. This is where proteins are made. So this is the site of a process known as protein synthesis. The next cell I'll be looking at is the plant cell. This is a general diagram of a plant cell. It's also known as a palisade cell, which is found in leaves. This cell has 3 extra subcellular structures that you need to know about. So we've got the nucleus, we have the mitochondria, cell membrane, and cytoplasm. These are all common in both plant and animal cells. As I said earlier, there are actually 3 additional structures that you need to know about in plant cells. First one, chloroplasts. These are really important. They contain a pigment called chlorophyll. This pigment gives plants or leaves their green color, but also are important in capturing the sunlight's energy to carry out a process known as photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is a chemical reaction between carbon dioxide and water that produces glucose and oxygen. The glucose is the food that plants require. We then have this structure known as the vacuole. The vacuole stores cell sap and helps keep the cell firm and rigid. This provides rigidity. And lastly, we have the cell wall. The cell wall is made of a substance known as cellulose. And the cell wall supports and protects the cell. We then have a group of cells known as prokaryotic cells. Prokaryotic cells are cells that do not contain a nucleus. Okay, very important there. They do not contain a nucleus or chromosomes. Instead, you will find a large loop of chromosomal DNA inside the cytoplasm, and it's described as free floating. They also do not have mitochondria or chloroplasts. Here is a diagram of a generic bacterial cell. They come in different shapes and sizes, but usually have the parts that I have identified. So the first thing we have here is called a flagellum. The flagellum is used for movement. Not all bacterial cells have these. We then have our chromosomal DNA. As I mentioned earlier, this is free floating within the bacterial cell's cytoplasm. It will control most of the cell's activities. We then have these structures known as plasmids. And plasmids are smaller loops of DNA which will control a few of the cell's activities, which include things like resistance. So antibiotic resistance is due to these rings of DNA. We then have the cytoplasm. And the cytoplasm contains ribosomes. And one of the key things to remember here are that the ribosomes are much smaller than those found in the eukaryotic cells. So prokaryotic ribosomes are much smaller than eukaryotic ribosomes. There is also a flexible cell wall. This cell wall is not made of cellulose, but again will provide support and protection. And finally, the outer layer of the bacterial cell is known as a slime coat. So this entire outer layer will be called a slime coat. And the slime coat is for protection. However, not all bacterial cells will have a slime coat. I would like to thank you for watching this video on eukaryotic and prokaryotic cells. I hope it has been useful and you have gained a better understanding of the two types of cells, their differences and similarities. Thank you for watching and see you next time.